Vince McMahon has a habit of judging a book by its cover. Throughout his career, McMahon has decided whether he likes a wrestler based on his first impression of them. That wrestler then works extra hard to win over McMahon, and thankfully the names on this list managed to do just that. The wrestler put in a ton of effort to truly get over with the audience, and then they combined this with excellent in-ring and character work, and slowly but surely McMahon realizes that he was wrong. Join us now as Wrestlelamia looks at 10 WWE wrestlers Vince McMahon expected to suck. Be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell for daily wrestling videos, and follow us on Facebook for exclusive lists. Also check out our new channel, Wrestlelamia Shorts. Number 10. Mick Foley. WWE Hall of Famer Mick Foley managed to get 3 distinctive characters over in WWE, those being Mankind, Cactus Jack, and Dude Love. Whilst Foley achieved substantial success in WWE, winning the WWE title on several occasions, Vince McMahon notoriously didn't see much value in Foley at the beginning. Speaking on a special A&E documentary focused on Foley, this is what McMahon had to say. "I thought it was kind of degrading to our product. I thought he didn't have any talent. I thought it was déclassé. Mick always had that connection with the audience, and I never really saw that before he came here. I thought, boy, we're never gonna hire that guy, but he did. He had that connection, and very few people have that." Number 9. Shawn Michaels. Vince McMahon and Shawn Michaels have had a great deal of respect and admiration for each other, but this wasn't always the case. When they needed new main event stars in the mid-90s and HBK was suggested, McMahon was firmly against the idea. McMahon didn't think HBK had what it took to reach the next level in WWE, and one of the reasons why McMahon had a personal issue with him was due to his size. WWE executive Bruce Pritchard would discuss this on an appearance on Sam Roberts' podcast. This is what he had to say.
There's a lot of situations where we pitched big, sweeping, just simple things like Shawn Michaels is a babyface. That little son of a bitch will never be a babyface in my company. And he didn't see it. And then after WrestleMania 11, Vince gets in the car and says, "God damn it, guys, we have a babyface on our hands. Why am I'm the only one that sees this?" And Pat and I are looking at each other going, we were told never to bring that idea up ever again. It's crazy.
Right.
But Pat especially, and Pat was probably the first one that actually made the statement, "I could see Shawn Michaels as WWF champion."
And did he get his head torn off for it?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, Vince didn't see Shawn as the WWF champion at that time.
Number 8. Gunther. When Gunther was called up to the main roster, there was logical concern from fans that Vince McMahon wouldn't get Gunther's character. During the start of his run, it looked like McMahon was a fan. However, a report then surfaced from WrestleVotes who indicated that McMahon was not a fan of Gunther backstage, and he wanted to bury Gunther with immediate effect. Thankfully for Gunther, this was around the same time in which McMahon was getting set to take a leave of absence, and there were even reports that the claims of McMahon hating Gunther were exaggerated. Nevertheless, it was clear that Gunther eventually won over McMahon, and it was reported months later that he was impressed with Gunther's in-ring work. And his presentation throughout 2023 has been a clear indicator that McMahon is now firmly a Gunther fan. Number 7. LA Knight. The WWE fans were left utterly speechless when popular NXT star LA Knight made his debut on the main roster. LA Knight would appear on SmackDown as Max Dupree, and he would become a manager for the Maximum Male models. It was reported that Vince McMahon had a lack of faith in LA due to his age, so subsequently made the call to make him a manager. This was a terrible fit for LA Knight, and the call was eventually made for LA to revert to his prior persona. Even though McMahon clearly had a negative impression of LA Knight upon his main roster debut, this has thankfully changed, and it's since been reported that McMahon has had a change of heart when it comes to one of WWE's fastest rising stars. Number 6. Daniel Bryan. Daniel Bryan was everything that Vince McMahon doesn't traditionally like in a WWE star. When he first started in WWE, it was made perfectly clear that McMahon didn't get Bryan, and when Bryan had his first WWE match on NXT against Chris Jericho, McMahon reportedly had a less than positive response to Bryan's work in the match. When Jericho came through the curtain following the match, all McMahon had to say was less than positive remarks in relation to Bryan being vegan. Bryan's popularity would eventually skyrocket, and McMahon had no choice but to place him in the main event scene. This slowly but surely changed the relationship between the two men, and when Bryan initially retired back in 2016, footage from a behind-the-scenes documentary showed how hard it hit McMahon. When Bryan departed WWE in 2021, reports stated that McMahon loved Bryan. He would reflect on his relationship with McMahon during an interview at an AEW All-Out media scrum. I hate to say this, Vince and I have a great relationship and I love him, I do. Sometimes he's overprotective of me and I want to be able to push my limits. That's one of the things that I love about this, is the physicality of what we do out there. Number 5. Randy Orton. Randy Orton is considered to be a true legend within WWE, but at one stage Vince McMahon didn't even want Orton on the roster. When they were considering signing Orton, McMahon was against the idea due to Orton's issues when he was in the military. According to Jim Ross on his podcast, he informed McMahon that he should give Orton a second chance, and thankfully McMahon did. He did indeed have issues early on in his WWE career, but he eventually matured and became a legitimate star for the company. For over 2 decades, Orton has become a key fixture on WWE programming, and it's been made clear thanks to interviews and behind-the-scenes documentaries just how much respect McMahon has attained for the WWE icon. Number 4. Samoa Joe. It's often said that Vince McMahon has a preference when it comes to the appearance of his talent. This was the case when McMahon first saw Samoa Joe, and according to Bruce Pritchard, Joe didn't have the body type in which McMahon liked, so initially he opted against signing Joe. When WWE eventually did sign him, naturally there was some concern from fans that McMahon's prejudice was going to continue and Joe would be used as nothing more than enhancement talent. Thankfully, over time, Joe was able to show McMahon what he was made of. McMahon booked Joe in key angles such as feuds with Roman Reigns and a critically acclaimed feud with Brock Lesnar. Joe was even rumored to win the WWE title at one stage, and whilst this never came to fruition, it was evident that McMahon had become a fan of the Samoan submission machine. Number 3. The Miz. The Miz's first appearance on Raw was so bad that he genuinely thought he was going to be fired. The Miz came out on Raw to promote the Divas search, and it was apparent that Miz was so nervous that he messed up the majority of his promo. When Miz walked backstage, he encountered Vince McMahon and informed McMahon that this type of performance will never happen again. Ominously, McMahon replied, "I know it won't happen again." Miz's card was marked from that point onwards, and he worked endlessly to build up trust with McMahon, which he eventually did. Miz, a few years after his infamous Raw appearance, would be catapulted into the main event scene, and he would eventually win the WWE title in 2010. The Miz in modern WWE is considered to be one of the most reliable talents around, and if they had a media appearance that needs fulfilling, Miz will likely be at the top of the list when it comes to who McMahon wants to represent the company. Number 2. Chris Jericho. A few years before Chris Jericho became the first undisputed champion in WWE, Vince McMahon had a rather negative opinion of Jericho. Just a month or so into Jericho's run in WWE, McMahon believed that Jericho was the drizzling shit, and this stemmed from a number of wrestlers complaining about Jericho's in-ring work. Jericho discussed McMahon's opinion of him during an episode of Talk is Jericho, and this is what he had to say.
And I almost got fired about a month in because Vince said, the problem is I got called into a meeting with Vince, Jim Ross, and Blackjack Lanza, and that's when Vince was like, the problem with you is you're the drizzling shit. You're not worth the paper your contract is printed on. And I was like, you're green as grass. I'm like,
Jericho would win McMahon over in time, and the two still have a close bond to this very day, with Jericho mentioning that he has McMahon's personal number, and if he was ever to text McMahon, he would get a response within 5 minutes. And number 1, AJ Styles. One of the most exciting debuts in WWE history came at the 2016 Royal Rumble. AJ Styles finally arrived in WWE and everyone was excited, that is with the exception of Vince McMahon. According to AJ Styles during an appearance on the My Love Letter to Wrestling podcast, McMahon had no idea who he was and he thought the Rumble crowd ovation was a fluke. McMahon clearly had low expectations when it came to Styles, and Styles himself admitted that he expected McMahon to place him in the mid-card, but Styles during an interview with Dirtfork would discuss when McMahon changed his tune and became a fan of the Phenomenal One. He didn't think too much of AJ Styles, but the turning point where Vince really saw something in me when I had a regular match, a babyface match, went out there and did my thing. I came back to Gorilla and Vince says, "Come here for a second. I've got other guys who can do exactly what you just did out there. You didn't do anything special. I need a pit bull. I need a guy who just attacks. I need a guy who gets after it." I said, well, I know that guy. I know exactly who that guy is, and there was the opportunity to be on Miz TV, and I handled it just like I was ready to eat this guy's lunch, and basically, I think the way that turned out was the turning point for Vince. The next thing you know, after WrestleMania, I'm beating Chris Jericho and I'm the #1 contender for the WWE Championship against Roman Reigns, where we had a couple of fantastic matches. That was the turning point. That's when things changed, and that's how I became the AJ Styles that you know now. But there you have it, folks. 10 WWE wrestlers Vince McMahon expected to suck. Be sure to leave your comments down below, and I'll see you next time with some more wrestling content.